All right, welcome to 8.3 day 2. It's called factoring by grouping. It's very similar to what we did. I would say that it's a combination of what we did 2 days ago and what we did yesterday. So the first thing is it's similar to what we did the first time by factoring out a GCF, but in this case the GCF is a group of things rather than just one. So if you notice here in red I have 5 times x plus 2 plus 3 times x plus 2. I can take out this whole x plus 2 and factor it out front, which means it's no longer here. Oops, I lost my mouse and my thing is thinking, my computer. Alright, where's my mouse at? Now it's clearing my screen. Oh, goodness. Right, anything? Alright, we have life again. Alright, so when I take out the x plus 2, and now it's going to be even messier. It's like that's gone, and that's gone, so I'm just left with 5 plus 3. Right, so the second one is the same thing. I have a b plus 1 and a b plus 1. And this one really has a 1 in front of it. Don't forget that. So when I factor out the b plus 1, it's gone from here. So I'm just left with the leftovers, which is the negative 2b and the plus 1. Alright, so the next one I want to try, the next two I want you to try on your own. The fifth one is not on your note sheet, and you're going to see why in a second. So pause the video and see if you can get these ones. Alright, so number 3 has an s plus 6 and an s plus 6. I'm going to take that out front, cross them out, so I factor them out, and just leave the leftovers. The leftovers are 4s and minus 5. And this fourth one has a 2x plus 3 and a 2x plus 3, and notice this one has nothing out in front, so you're going to put a 1 there. So I'm going to take out the 2x plus 3, so that's gone and that's gone. I'm just going to write the leftovers, so I have a 7x left and I have a plus 1 left. So that's the factored form. Now number 5 is not on your note sheet for a reason. You notice you have a z squared minus 7 in your parentheses and a 2z cubed plus 1. This one can't be factored. So if you don't get a matching thing, that either means it can't be factored or you made a mistake on the next problems. Now we're going to jump into the big over. So this is going to look like a big example at first, but bear with me. I just want to give you the steps, and then we'll start fresh with an example and you'll see how it works. So it's factoring by grouping. So the first step is to just group the first two terms and the last two terms. So the n cubed plus 3n squared gets grouped together in parentheses, and the 4n plus 12 gets grouped together. That's an easy step. Second step, figure out what each parenthesis has in common. So this n cubed and 3n squared has an n squared in common. Goes back to factoring out the GCF, so it's like you're dividing each one of these by n squared. So I'm left with an n and a 3, because the n's on this cancel. If I look at the second set of parentheses, a 4n and a 12 have just a 4 in common. So I'm left with an n, and when I divide this by 4, I'm left with 3. Now this is what I meant by if they don't match, you did something wrong. Notice that in my parentheses I have an n plus 3 and an n plus 3. That's going to come out front. And again, like I did before, I'm going to write the leftovers in the next one. So the leftovers are n squared plus 4. So now I've factored that big messy thing at the beginning into just what we've done before, 2 sets of parentheses. So let's look at the second example. Step 1. Group your first two terms, so the y squared and the 5y. That's your first set of parentheses, and then group your last two terms, 3y and 15 together. Now you're going to look at each one individually, so it's basically like you block this one out of your mind and you just look at this chunk here. So I'm just going to look at this and say, okay, y squared and 5y have just a y in common, so I'm going to divide each one of those by y. So I'm left with y, because I take away 1, 1 cancels, and then the y's on this cancel, so I'm left with 5. So y times y plus 5 is really the same thing as y squared plus 5y. Now we look at the second set. 3y and 15 have 3 in common. So if I take a 3 away from each of these, I'm left with y, and 15 divided 3 is 5. Now check. Inside parentheses, I have a y plus 5 and a y plus 5. Those should match. So I'm left with y plus 5. And then I just write the leftovers, which is a y and a 3. So in the second set, I write y plus 3. And now I've just factored by grouping. And again, you could FOIL it out and check your answer. So I'm going to do that just to show you that it's the same. So if I do y times y, I get y squared. If I do y times 3, I get 3y. 5 times y is 5y. And 5 times 3 is 15. Notice that's the same as my original, except these two are just switched, so I could just switch those around and say that I've checked my answer. So now we're going to take away the steps and just see if we can do this from memory. So first step is, write it down and see if you can remember it. First step is easy. Group the first two and the last two by just putting parentheses. Now you're solely going to look at this first group here and say, all right, 2x cubed and 8x squared have a 2x squared in common. So when I factor that out, I'm left with x plus 4. And the next chunk, you're just going to look at the second group, 3x and 12. Keep the plus sign. Keep that sign and bring it down. So you're left with, let's see, if you have a 3x and a 12, they have a 3 in common. So when I take away a 3, I'm left with x. And when I take away a 3 from 12, I'm left with 4. Again, these parentheses should match, so I can pull that out front. And then I just write the leftovers in the next one. Remember that plus sign's important. So I'm left with 2x squared plus 3. And that's my factored form. If you wanted to FOIL it out and check it, that would be fine as well. Alright, so now I get to this one. I want you to pause the video and try this one completely on your own. You can refer back to the steps if you need to. Alright, so I'm going to group the first ones and the last two together, so it's like two separate problems. 12n squared and 15n have 3n in common. So you can think about it as dividing, or you can just picture what you need. So if I want to get a 12, I need 4, and if I have an n already, I just need one more n. And then 15 divided 3 is 5, and the n's cancel. Drag the plus sign down, that's important. 8n and 10 have 2 in common, and 8 divided 2 is 4n, and 10 divided 2 is 5. Notice that when I've done this correctly, the parentheses match. So that's what gets pulled out front. There, it's like those are gone now. So you just write the leftovers. So it's 3n plus 2. So that is the factored form of this original polynomial up here. Remember, you can distribute it out to check your answer. Alright, now this one I don't want you to pause the video for because you run into something special with this one. I'm going to group them. And I'm going to start with this first group. 5b to the fourth and 15b to the third have 5b to the third in common. So I'm left with b minus 3. Then I look at this next one. I keep the plus sign. But if I factor this, I'm left with 3 minus b. They have nothing in common, and notice they don't match. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange these. I'm going to rewrite it as negative b plus 3. Now notice that it's still the opposite sign here. So I'm going to change this to a positive and make this one positive and this one negative. So I just switched the signs. Here, let me rewrite that. So originally, this was a positive 3 and a negative b. It's basically like I'm going to be multiplying the negative through, so I end up with a positive b and a negative 3. So I get 5b to the third times b minus 3 plus, hold on, let's rewrite that. So we rearrange it as negative b plus 3. I'm going to factor out. I'm going to distribute the negative, so I end up with I'm going to factor out a -1 here, so I'm left with b minus 3. That way, when I distribute the negative, I end up with a -b and a +3. So I factored out a -1 there. So I'm left with 5b to the third times b minus 3 minus 1 times b minus 3. Now I've got my parentheses to match finally. So I'm left with b minus 3 and 5b to the third minus 1. Now this -1 is a little tricky. Whenever you have the wrong signs here, factor out a -1 and basically just flip-flop the signs. So turn this into a +b and a -3. Keep the -1 outside though, and you'll end up with the correct one. Now this one, since it did take us a little bit of work, I am going to FOIL this one out to see if I get it to match. 5b to the fourth minus b and -15b to the third plus 3. Notice all I need to do is switch around the middle ones and I've got my final answer. Right, the on your owns, try those tonight. Now I want to give you a heads up real quick. This one right here, you're going to need to factor out. You need to flip-flop it and factor out a -1, just like we did on the second one. So you should start by factoring these two. But the second one should turn into a -1 times 5m minus 15. That's your big hint on that one. So make sure you try that one on your own tonight, and I will see you tomorrow.